All right, so hey, welcome back to the archives. So I'm gonna do one more on the 36 great warriors, queens, and intellectuals. One of the women I learned about was Eleanor. Oh boy, Eleanor's story is a little messy. So right now we're in it's about 1136, and so we are in the southern west area of France. Aquitaine, is that how you say it? So it's a region in southern West France, and it's ruled by Duke William the 10th. And Duke William had two daughters. Eleanor was the eldest. She was pampered, again, wealthy, right? Old money. She was really famous. She grew up in castles. Her family also, the last video I talked about the First Crusade. Eleanor's family was also tied to those who were in the Holy Land fighting for the Crusades. And so her family had their ears on the ground what was going on in the Holy Land, right? Because at the time, the First Crusade, basically, the Muslims had Jerusalem and a lot of the Holy Lands, and the Christian Crusaders went to go fight to be like, no, Muslims need to get out of the Holy Land. This needs to be Christian territory. And so Eleanor, her dad, once he dies, she's now basically an orphan, right? And so the king wants to take her. And so she basically is set up with Louise the Seventh, who is the next in line. And the two of them are married in Bordeaux, Saint Andre. They went to Paris, and so a few weeks after their wedding, the first King Louis VI dies, right? So King Louis VII steps in, and that's her husband. So now she's married to the emperor. Emperor King Louis VII is her husband. And basically it talks about how they were really mismatched. They were very, very mismatched. Eleanor and Louise were mismatched. The thing that's important to note here is Eleanor's father, all of her father's inheritance, when he died, it went to her, right? And her father's inheritance was to remain with her until she had a son. And at which point, if she had a son, then she would pass the inheritance down to her son, and the French would basically take it, right? And so it would go basically to King Louise VII through her son. And so her and King Louise, they got pregnant at one point, but she lost her son. She miscarried. 7 years later, they had a daughter at the age of 7. So pay attention because the next one, Marie, is their daughter. I'm going to get into Marie. But for right now, we're talking about Eleanor. So Eleanor and Marie had a daughter. At age 30, Eleanor was like, I'm not doing this anymore because I'm barely having sex with my husband. Like, King Louis VII was not very sexual with her. Apparently, he ended up having, like, I don't remember how many kids he had, but it looked like she was the one who wasn't having kids. But when you'll see, she later gets remarried and she ends up having 8 or 9 kids for the next man. So it wasn't her, it was King Louise. And I think maybe there's a little bit of download stuff going on. I'm wondering if he learned from Elagabalus, because remember, Emperor Elagabalus was like openly out, queer, having sex with men and women, publicly married a man, but his rule was short-lived. His own mom took him out. His grandmother took him out. So I'm wondering if um, Emperor Louis VII was like, I can't get down like that publicly because he barely had sex with Eleanor. Apparently, he was really pious and really like a monk. He really observed religious holidays. So I didn't know this, but in the Christian church at the time, it was said that you couldn't have sex, obviously, on Sundays. You couldn't have sex on feast days. So all of the different feast days, all of the saints, um, Lent, Easter, all like any sort of special church day, you weren't allowed to have sex. And obviously, not obviously, but they said women weren't allowed to have sex on their periods, and then you weren't allowed to have sex when you were pregnant. So overall, apparently, if you're a staunch Christian, there's only like 100 days out of the year that you can actually have sex, right? Or there's 100 days you can't have sex, apparently. And King Louis VII was just such a good man that he observed all of those days and barely had sex with her. But as you'll find out later, when they go fight a crusade, he would sleep in the tents with his bodyguards and not his wife. So it sounds like his bodyguards were getting more action than she was. But again, that's allegedly. I don't know. That's just my own opinion. But it's interesting how history frames him as like a pious, a monk, a good man. I'm just like, I think he had a very rich sex life. It's just he didn't like having sex with her or women. I don't know. But that was the thing. So they weren't very compatible. They only had sex to procreate, which is what a staunch Christian's done. Sex is not about pleasure. Sex is about procreation. You're not supposed to enjoy it. You just have sex for kids. And so, 7 years later, they had a daughter, right? At 30, Eleanor was like, I'm done. I want my wedding annulled. Um, I don't want to be married to him anymore. And she went on and later married, who did she marry? Henry II of England. She married another, so she's still noble. She had her marriage annulled and she went to marry Henry II of England. They had 8 kids, 3 girls, 5 boys. Louise was indoctrinated by church. Okay, do. What else? News came that the Muslims had made more advancements in the Holy Land, and so um, oh yeah, the warrior Zengi from Syria. Zengi took over Edessa, and just brutalized Odessa. Just brutalized. The Muslims brutalized them. And people wrote messages to Pope Eugenius at the time. Um, so people were like, Pope, Zengi's army has destroyed us. What are you going to do? They wrote to the Pope in Rome. Messages were sent to Germany, to the King Conrad III in Germany. And messages were also sent to Paris to King Louis VII and Eleanor, because at that time, they were still married at that time. And so the Pope was like, bet, here, let's do another crusade. I think this was the second crusade. And so Pope Eugenius called for a crusade again. The Pope promised remission of sins, salvation. So you will get salvation if you fight this crusade for us. Apparently Bernard of Clairvaux preached a beautiful sermon, and Eleanor was like, I'm going. You're not leaving me back. I'm going. And people were like, why does Eleanor want to go? And she's like, I'm going. So Eleanor brought her girls along. Apparently, they brought a lot of luggage. And so the convoy was really stretched thin. The Muslims were up high. They saw them. They saw that there was a huge gap, and they attacked the guards. And it was a disaster. And so the Muslims attacked the Crusades. Um, they blamed the women, right? The women traveled too heavy, they had too much luggage. That's why the convoy was as long as it was. And King Louis was like, no, this is my fault. This is my fault. Let me take accountability. So King Louis VII took accountability, and basically he said, I'm going to relinquish my rights and I'm going to give it to the Knights of the Templars. Louise and Eleanor went on to visit her uncle. This is where it gets tricky because you're like, why would they go visit her uncle? Her uncle lived in Antioch. So Eleanor was the orchestrator. She's the one who orchestrated. She's like, on our way to Jerusalem, let's go to Antioch where my uncle is. And then there was rumors of incest. Apparently, Eleanor and her uncle were getting it on. to the point where King Louis VII was jealous. So it wasn't just rumors. She was really in it. Again, we don't know if it was like forced, if she enjoyed it, but basically she was having an incestuous relationship with her uncle. Incest is banned. So in 829, marriage banned marriages between generations. You couldn't marry anybody within 7 generations. So if somebody you knew was related to you within 7 generations, which again is a huge gap, right? You're not allowed to marry them. So it was a huge scandal. King Louise wanted to go to Jerusalem. Eleanor was just fucking her uncle. She wanted to stay to be with her uncle. And King Louise was like, no, what are you doing? So she was charged with adultery, with fornication outside of her marriage, with incest. Like she's just racking up all the charges, right? Um, and basically her and her uncle. Oh yeah, word on the street is okay. So hold on, it gets messy. So basically, King Louise kidnaps her in the middle of the night and takes her to Jerusalem with him. Eleanor's pissed. She doesn't want to be in Jerusalem. She wants to be with her incestuous uncle, right? So he takes her. They go to uh, Jerusalem. Basically, it failed. The Muslims attacked Antioch. Her uncle was killed. It was just a hot mess. The Crusaders lost at first, right? And people blamed her because they're like, Eleanor is just why, like, these are our leaders. Louis VII is our leader, and you just created all of this wahala for him. He can't even focus because now he's thinking about his wife getting pined down by by her uncle. So they blamed her basically. She got blamed for them losing at that time. When they went back after they lost, they went back to Paris, and she was like, annul this marriage. The irony is, she wanted her marriage annulled because she said she was related to King Louis VII by 4 or 5 degrees. So she got her marriage annulled for incest. She wanted it annulled. He said no. King Louis was like, no, we're not annulling this marriage. And the Pope intervened. So this is one of the first time that the church intervenes. And basically she's like, Pope, will you annul the marriage? And the Pope was like, no. Matter of fact, not only am I not annulling the marriage, the Pope set up a nice bed for them, brought them back together, was like, you two are going to have sex. You guys are going to make it work. And that's how their 7 years later, their daughter was born because the Pope refused to give them an annulment and made them basically have sex. And then it produced a daughter, which is a girl, Marie. And so that was one of the first times that the church really showed that, like, they can get involved. But ironically, later on, there was worse. There was like rumors going around, same thing that she'd been saying, that she was related to King Louise. And so now the people are going to King Louise being like, you guys are related by like 4 or 5 degrees. What are you doing? Then apparently King Louise is like, oh my God, this is so wrong. I can't live in sin anymore. You're right. Annul this marriage. So then King Louise eventually had the marriage annulled because they were incestuous. They were related. Ironically, she left King Louis VII to go to King Henry of England, and they were also related, even more related, by like 4 degrees or something like that. So basically, that's what happened. Eleanor went to Henry the Third or the Second. They were even more related. No one brought that up. So again, it showed the church's flexibility. The church got involved in one case. The church didn't get involved in another case. They just basically were like, we're just going to pretend that you and King Henry are not related, even though they're still related. It's still incest. No one said anything. Um, yeah, so the fall of Jerusalem was basically blamed on Eleanor for the Crusaders losing because she distracted the leaders with her scandal with her husband, and they lost the Holy Land because of her, basically. That's how she's known for. So yeah. Then her daughter, remember the daughter they had, her and King Louise, that's a whole nother thing. So, I'll get into Marie of Champagne next, but this was pretty much Eleanor, where is it here? Eleanor of Aquitaine goes on a crusade. So she went on a crusade, all right, and we end up finding out that she was in love with her uncle, and then she left her husband, her incestuous husband, to get into another relationship with another incestuous husband. But Europe was messy. Like, oh my goodness, this is Europe. So, anyways, yeah, that is Eleanor. I guess I'm gonna do one more on Marie, and then I'll leave it for the day. I also learned about Hildegard. I'll do one more because I gotta get going.